In 1983, the Soviet Pacific Fleet operated as a formidable but heavily strained military apparatus. At the center of this fleet was the K-429, a nuclear-powered cruise missile submarine. By early June, the boat was docked and disabled, awaiting a list of critical maintenance repairs. To exhaust fumes from shipyard welding, the boat's ventilation valves were opened to their maximum extent. More importantly, the safety interlocks, the automatic systems meant to shut those valves, had been disabled. The K-429 was functionally a floating construction site. In this state, it was mechanically incapable of performing a safe dive. Despite the boat's condition, Rear Admiral Oleg Yerofeyev ordered the K-429 to immediately depart for a high-stakes naval exercise. The order required Suvorov to take his broken boat to a torpedo firing range located at a depth of 2,000 meters, far deeper than the submarine was designed to survive. Captain Suvorov refused. He pointed out that his crew was on leave and the submarine was in no condition to submerge. The admiral responded with an ultimatum: sail or lose his Communist Party membership and face a military tribunal. Suvorov finally agreed, but insisted on one condition: he would perform a shallow 50-meter test dive before heading to the deeper range. This single insistence on procedure would eventually be the only reason anyone survived the coming days. Because the original crew was unavailable, naval officials scrambled to assemble an ersatz crew by pulling sailors from 5 different submarines currently in port. The submarine was designed for a maximum of 87 men, but the Navy forced 120 on board. Over 30% of these men had never even served on a Charlie-class submarine before. To meet the admiral's timeline, the Navy skipped all pre-launch safety checks and ignored the fact that this new crew had never trained together on this boat. The K-429 was now a broken machine manned by strangers, leaving no one with the experience to catch the errors that were about to follow. After arriving at the shallow waters of Saranaya Bay, Captain Suvorov finally gave the order to begin the fateful test dive. Because the pre-dive checks were ignored, the crew didn't realize the ballast gauges were misaligned. This schematic shows the tanks flooding while the gauges in the control room read empty. Suvorov, trusting the faulty gauges, attempted to force the boat down by filling the auxiliary tanks. He inadvertently gave the boat massive negative buoyancy. As the boat submerged, the ventilation valves left open in the shipyard acted like a funnel, pouring ocean water directly into the 4th reactor compartment. Over 420 tons of freezing seawater violently flooded the forward compartments, killing 14 men almost immediately. The K-429 slammed into the seabed at 39 meters. It was a disaster, but the shallow depth meant the hull hadn't imploded. Inside, the conditions were critical. Power had failed, and the boat's batteries were leaking explosive hydrogen gas into the freezing air. When the crew tried to signal for help, they discovered their emergency escape pods and communication buoys had been welded shut by the shipyard to ensure they wouldn't be lost during transport. Naval headquarters, meanwhile, simply forgot about them. Despite the submarine failing to report in, no one at the base raised an alarm for an entire day. Rescue only began after 2 volunteers risked their lives to crawl out of a torpedo tube and swim to the surface. When they reached the shore, they were immediately arrested by frontier guards. The K-429 crew had to survive both the pressure of the ocean and a chain of command that didn't even care they were missing. The importance of Suvorov's shallow test dive is clear when you look at the alternative. If he had followed the admiral's orders to the 2,000-meter range, the water pressure would have crushed the boat, killing everyone on board. Because the boat rested on a shallow shelf, rescue teams were eventually able to save 104 of the 120 sailors. In the aftermath, the Soviet Navy focused on containing the political embarrassment rather than investigating the structural failures that led to the sinking. Admiral Yerofeyev, who ordered the mission, was promoted. Captain Suvorov, who saved his crew from certain death, was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The trial existed to insulate the naval hierarchy from the consequences of its own decisions, regardless of the facts. Eventually, the Navy raised the K-429 from the bottom and returned it to the shipyard for repairs. But the boat's luck never improved. In 1985, while simply tied to its moorings in the harbor, the K-429 sank a second time. The second sinking occurred while the boat was simply sitting at its pier. It serves as the final evidence of a command structure that valued obedience and optics over the basic requirements of keeping a nuclear fleet afloat.